funny because when I talk about starting a record label, I look at it in two ways. Like one, I think like I started with low standards, but then I also realized like I actually had really high standards. So before I started the label, I released some records by my first band on this label called Ebullition, and and I feel really grateful and lucky to have done that, and I'm not sure exactly how I pulled that off, but it happened, and it set this standard of like what I expected records that I was part of to kind of look and feel like and sound like, and the whole everything. It should be like this level, you know. And so that band broke up, and I started a new band, or even before that band broke up, I mean, just kind of like people would, of this sort of like start of like what is now considered or became DIY culture, other people starting labels were like, hey, I'm doing a record label, let me put out your EP, or let me put your band on this compilation. And then, you know, kind of getting these records and like seeing the flaws in it or like the laziness in it. And I'm like, like that sucks. You know, I could have done that myself, like at least as shitty as that. You know, the start of it was like, okay, I'm gonna do my own label, and I'm smart enough and I'm creative enough to maneuver in the world of punk with what I do and don't have. And so, you know, I was I was going to City College, and I had financial aid, and I was getting more money than I needed, and so I was like able to like put a little bit aside and not have to pay for my books and for my housing and stuff. So I had a bunch of money, and I was like, I'm gonna put a record out, and with that record I realized like I don't have the ability, financial ability, but also like the know-how to really properly release a single. And luckily enough, the bands that I was dealing with initially were like, they didn't care, and they wanted it to be kind of like this sort of aesthetic that maybe labels like Vinyl Communications with like rubber stamps instead of like a printing, or like spray paint instead of printing, you know, like so the records that I was putting out was like, you know, I would go to like the cheapest pressing plant, get the cheapest vinyl. I would go to Kinko's where my friends work and print stuff for free at night when, you know, they were working the graveyard shift, and then like do like rubber stamps or physically glue every cover. And, you know, like it was a lot of ridiculous labor, but the end goal was like, I got this record made for next to nothing. And then, was able to sell it and put that money into releasing more stuff and starting something. So it goes back to like, you know, using elements of garbage or trash or whatever, or things that have been discarded on another, from another sort of mindset, you know, and using those things to make something cool that a lot of people wish they had thought of or whatever, you know. So I think it was like, that was what was able to start the label. And it was funny because then once I started the label, at one point I was like, oh, I want to put out like a normal record, you know, like one that doesn't require me sitting on my floor and like gluing 2,000 covers and like hand doing something, you know. I just want them to be done, you know. So yeah, I mean, it's been a long way since then, but like, but at that point I there was no other option. It was like, again, it was like I could have these other people do these records like kind of like in a shitty way, or I could just do them myself in this absurd manner, and it'll be better. And if there is failure, I'm the one to blame, not someone else, and I can correct that. So, and I just made sure I wasn't going to fail. Everyone, you know, because it's looking at San Diego as its own entity in comparison to other cities, even Los Angeles, is unique in itself because it's inherently a conservative city, it's a tourist city, it's a military city, it's very institutionally racist, it's not very welcoming to like the arts on a creative level aside from what is marketable and what ties into like capitalism. So I think a lot of people, even people like before I even like lived here, before I even started playing music, were already doing these things. So we already had this element of like this sort of like underbelly or this like underworld of like creativity brewing. And it was, once you figured it out, you were part of this team to go and do whatever you wanted in your own unique way, you know? And so like when I started playing music, we would play shows with reggae bands, or we would play with like, you know, these like, we played with like this band Tijuana No. I remember playing with them there, and I don't even know what you would call it. It's like not cumbia. I don't know what it was back then, you know, but it was like, or playing like with 3 Mile Pilot or something, you know, and I'm in like a metal band. It seems like so strange, but everybody was friends, and it made sense to everybody that we were all connecting on a certain level. And maybe like by industry standards, it didn't make sense, but to us, it all made sense. And so I think that gave us the ability to, on our own, draw influences from things that normally people wouldn't have like observed and accepted. So like, to me, like, let's say like Crash Worship, like where the hell did that come from? Drive Like Jehu, where did that come from? You know, or even things like, you look at like Unbroken, that's a great example because, you know, they sounded like Slayer and they looked like Morrissey. Like no one did that before them. So these are things that I think were part of the roots of San Diego that most cities never really had, because they probably had a better platform where they're like, you can be in this kind of band, you can do this thing, go ahead and do it. These other bands did it, you can just follow suit. Here it's like, oh, we're all weird and you're into that and I'm into this, but like let's come together and make this one thing and figure out where it fits in the world later, you know. And then it's like going and seeing shows under the 94 freeway in the sewer. Like, who does that? You know, it's like, because someone came up with that idea and they figured it out, where like that's the trash that most people would be like, I'm not going to the sewer. But like I went down there and saw some of the craziest shit that you only would see like in a trauma movie or something, you know, and you're like, oh, that really does happen, or did happen, or could happen. And then it's like, well, what else can we do that's like that or beyond that, you know? And I think a lot of people just like stop with their creativity because they're like, here's the level. So like San Diego, I feel like, you know, maybe it has its ups and downs, but for the most part, there's always someone that's kind of pushing that envelope to like go like, let's do this weird thing now, you know? San Diego's like leading biotechnology or like, you know, whatever. It's like, I mean, that does happen here. But it's also like all the people that aren't part of that are having some sort of reaction to this sort of like military like mindset or stronghold that it does have on this city, or like the fact that it's like geared towards tourism and not towards the people that live here, or our neighbors in Tijuana, you know, like that, just like those are human beings that are just discarded, you know. And that's something that I think adds an element of like, again, like kind of thinking about like, not, I mean, yeah, it's negative, and yeah, there's like passion and there's hate and there's empathy and there's all these things, but it comes out in art in different ways. It comes out in like the most righteous ways. I mean, I remember like kind of growing up and seeing this like comedian, or it's not a comedian, it's like a stand-up thing called Culture Clash. And like, I don't know what that is, like performance art or whatever. And, you know, it wasn't like, it's very funny and very humorous, you know, and amusing. And I really, really connected with it. But it was like, man, they were talking about like really dark things, like really, really fucked up racist shit that like they managed to sort of take these truths that like people of color were experiencing in San Diego and bring them to this other platform that like, you know, you could go see them perform in like, in La Jolla, you know, like it just seems like kind of crazy. But like, I don't think that like something like Culture Clash necessarily would have happened in like Phoenix, you know? I mean, maybe it does happen in Phoenix, but whatever. The point is, like, it happened in San Diego, and it had this like righteousness to it, you know. And and even like me, like growing up and like seeing that, and even like my mom wanting to go take me to it as like a 13-year-old or whatever it was when I first started, like when I first heard about Culture Clash, it was like really, really impactful, you know, and like made me kind of find what was right about like certain social politics, you know, like yeah, I'm not a person of color. I'm just I'm just white trash. Like, but I like connected with these people's art, and it made sense to me as a 13-year-old, where you're like, you don't really fully understand the elements of racism, you know, even if you are subjected to it firsthand, like you don't fully understand it. And I'm like, wow, this is something that's gnarly, and like it's a big deal on a massive level. I'm so glad I'm experiencing this in this art form that's like digestible for someone, you know. And I think like also seeing like seeing things that are not necessarily positive in the form of art, where it's like sort of labeled as entertainment, helps you learn. It's like easier than like seeing a lecture or hearing from someone that's being oppressed, you know, like there was something that was to it that was like a creative element which like helped me understand it and digest it a lot easier. Ian MacKaye from Fugazi made this example about DC in relation to, maybe it's in Bill's film, about it is, yeah. So like, you know, about how San Diego is like in like this sort of like petri dish next to Los Angeles, like we're just in the shadows, so we can kind of grow this thing. That is really, really accurate, you know, and I see that too. I see a lot of correlation between DC and San Diego with the politics, with it being next to a gigantic city, and then the art that comes out of those two cities, you know, like it is interesting to see that. And I think he really hit the nail on the head with that comment, and it resonated like one of the best quotes or pieces, and I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because I already had seen this sort of like connection between the two cities, especially like when I started really playing music and was already aware of like DC and Discord and Fugazi and stuff, but like bands like Nation, Ulysses coming to San Diego and influencing like Antioch Arrow and Click Ektawi, and like kind of seeing this sort of like connection between these two conservative cities. You know, it was a very, very interesting point. And so when he brought that up, it made sense, because I wonder if like a band like Fugazi could have come out of New York, or, you know, or if a band like Crash Worship could have come out of Los Angeles. It's a Dan Armstrong, so like normally it has a pick guard that's Formica, like a fake wood pick guard, and then the pickup like slides in and out. So I randomly found one at this place in Los Angeles and bought it. It was just like this, because the action is really low and it plays really fast, and you could play like you know, like play like chords up here, which on like, you know, normal basses the action's super high, so it's kind of hard to be able to get like a chord. But then I got another one and modded it the same way. So I had a backup bass, which I needed, because there's been a few times on tour where I only had one bass and stuff broke, and then the show's over. So yeah. I think also too, as a bass player, I was like heavily influenced by John Reese's guitar playing. It's kind of a weird thing, but just like sort of like finding like discordant chords that might not necessarily be pleasing to the ear, you know, like to the normal ear. Yeah. And also, like, I have a ton of effects, so that kind of disguises a lot of the sounds. I mean, I guess like my gear also ties into the aesthetic of like just weird stuff too, you know, like the clearness of a Dan Armstrong bass doesn't help with the sound, or like, you know, I was just like, oh, clear, like that's so cool, you know. When I was 15, I recorded my first, I went into the studio for the first time and recorded one song for this compilation. And so, I mean, I was psyched to be on anything, you know, but like, the thing is like, it's pretty rad. Like, it's like a book. It comes with like tons of literature, you know, and it's super political, and not to mention like, you know, my band's on here with some of the raddest bands ever. Born Against, Bikini Kill, Iconochrist. So, you know, and it's like pretty rad printing, like the silver ink on here. You know, so that was like the start of that was like my introduction to like, oh, you can put out a record and it doesn't have to look like garbage. And again, I was 15, you know, so then like on the same label, they ended up releasing my first band's EP, which is very similar in style. It's a booklet or whatever, you know, but like, so I had like a standard, I guess, like a artistic and creative standard to put stuff out. Fast forward maybe, I don't know, 2 years to my second band, and we were gonna release Swing Kids. We're gonna release an EP, and this label decided, you know, they'd put it out, and they gave us like $300 to record or something. And, you know, we wanted it to be like in a record cover and a record sleeve, and they added this white frame, and it's like a, you know, it's a piece of paper, like it's like with a Cecil Taylor quote on the back. You know, like, I mean, the design was ours, the artwork was ours, but like the quality was just like pretty cheap. Like, you know, the printing was pretty cheap, like not a whole lot was put into it. That label folded, and I realized like I could repress this and probably do as good of a job. And so like over the years, you know, there's all these different kind of variations of the record that I put out. So some of them were actually printed in San Diego with my friend Vaughn at Custom Printing. And what we would do is he'd print them out, and they'd be like sort of marked to where you'd have to like cut little little triangles so you could fold in these tabs, and then we'd glue every single cover. So like some of them actually have like we would like write messages in the fold there, just like something stupid or something cool. I don't really remember what it was because I was 19 when we did that, or 20. So, you know, it just, but we wanted the record, you know, to come out like in a sleeve, like a real band, you know, like not like the punk rock like folded over Kinko's kind of thing. So the strange thing is, like, when I started the label was with Eric Allen from Unbroken, who was also in Swing Kids with me. You know, the idea was to put out this Unbroken single and the Swing Kids 7-inch repress. So Eric wanted to go like the opposite, because, you know, he had been used to like Unbroken putting out like glossy looking and like nice looking records. So I was like, all right, let's make it like he wants to, but like do it in like the fashion of what like Gravity Records and Vinyl Communications were doing. So it's totally not creative, but like it's awesome, and it kind of reeks of San Diego, which is cool. So the stamp, we made a rubber stamp, and each record got stamped, you know, with the band's logo. And, you know, again, it's like a folded over like, you know, thing, but like that was the aesthetic, kind of lo-fi, I guess, you know. And then over the years, I think we shifted a little bit to make like still the rubber stamp, but like it's an actual record cover. So it just kind of changed, you know, and again, like we would change the rubber stamp, you know, according to things, or like some of them, there's like collectors online where they're like, like Eric and I would just sit in my house and have to stamp all these records. And, you know, we were pressing like 3,000, 2,000 copies or something, you know, and so he would do like really kind of crazy shit, like glue like a picture of something on it, or like write, you know, whatever, or like put like fingerprints and like just kind of do like weird stuff. And then those are the, you know, super rare ones because there's only like one of those or whatever. So ridiculous. It costs a lot to make this, but then in order to pull it off, you know, pay a lot for this, and then the printing was done at Kinko's again. So the key back then, no pun intended, was to steal a copy key. and you go in and you print like, you know, fucking 10,000 copies on their copy key, and then you pay for like 5 on the other one. But so we were doing this like on their copier, where like we print red, and then they had red and blue and sometimes green options. So print red and then shift it and print blue, and then it looks like 3D. And so we were doing that for free. And then, you know, like the other insert for the record was this. So we didn't have to pay for that. We just had to pay for the manufacturing of this, which is crazy because it's a picture disc and it's a 5-inch. So it's more than a 7-inch. Like it doesn't make sense in a realistic. It's not very reasonable to do. So anyhow, this kind of like, this actually like put 31G on the map, I think. That's a term, for a few reasons. Because one, it was pretty crazy looking. I don't think there was a lot of these going on at the time. And for two, there was an electronic artist named Locust who was on Elektra, who ended up like threatening to sue the Locust. So that was also like a pretty rad thing too, which we kind of used like that to our benefit, to like, you know, like to like hype it up or whatever. And then we added there is a version of this record with the above it as well. Yeah, I mean, it kind of just started the process of like being creative and actually like figuring out your resources. So fast forward to our 17th release, I think it might be 17, I could be wrong, which is this Black Dice 40-page full color book, which is like totally insane as far as the packaging goes, because for one, we would go back to Vaughn at Custom Printing again and print all of the covers, and then we'd have all of the pages that we'd have to collate and like collate and staple together, like to be in the form of a real book. But you know, again, this is kind of adapting the idea of like what Struggle did with Ebullition in the booklet form, but we took it a step further and made it like the records like you got when you were a little kid that were like Star Wars, and it would come with like a thing, you know. And so the same kind of process happened where we'd have to like cut a little triangle and fold the flap over and glue it. So each record was like, we'd have to collate the book part, and then we'd have to cut and glue each cover, and then put them all together, and then insert the 7-inch, and then put it in a plastic sleeve or get them shrink wrapped, and then send them to the distributor. So it was like kind of insane. And then you're like, oh, because of like punk ethics or whatever, you know, you can't sell it for what it's actually worth. So we're like, okay, like the amount of like resources and hours that went into like each single, like not even considering the fact that the band, you know, wrote and created all the artwork for it, you know, like you can only sell it for $8 or whatever, you know, where like now these days, like if this came out brand new, it'd be like $40 or something, you know, like, so, you know, and then of course there's like utilizing like other elements of it too, like the pressing plant, like saying like, hey, like since there's not like a real like color aesthetic to it, like it's full color, all this like crazy stuff, we were like, just press like whatever. So like there we would get this box of 7 inches, and so that's black, and then, you know, there's like a blue color, and you know, like it just like we'd get all this weird shit, and it was cheaper. Like they would charge you for the black rate and not have to charge you for full, you know, for color, like double two color stuff. So we'd end up like with some kind of like insane, you know, insane pressings. And like also too, it's like impossible to go like, oh, there's 100 on this yellow. Like nobody knows, like which is rad in itself. Like, I don't know, but those exist, you know? So we get the box and I kind of go through, try to pick one of everything out. So there's that. And then this is like one of our more recent releases, which this is also too, like the Def Club 7-inch, which is like, there's all these like kind of like variants of the printing. And luckily enough, like the designer that I work with, Brandon McMinn, like has access to these kind of like sort of strange printers. so like this might be kind of hard to show, but so again, like it's also like in a sense like kind of cutting cost, because it's a one-sided single, so it looks like a picture disc, but it's actually just printed. The vinyl plays on one side, and then he prints the black and the red, and then prints white, and then prints this on the other side. And so like, I don't know if you can see it on camera, but there's like texture to it. So it's kind of insane. Like if I wasn't in the band and running the label and I got this, I'd be like, wow, that's like something you like would hang on your wall, kind of like it's pretty rad. I mean, it looks like someone like painted on it, where like, I think even like silkscreen, or if you were to get this manufactured at a pressing plant, it wouldn't have that texture to it. So, you know, I mean, and I'm grateful for Brandon, because he can kind of hook up like a deal for this to get done. Because otherwise, going back to the price, like this probably would cost more than anybody would want to pay for it. So, you know, and it's like 5 songs on one side of a record. I think it's like probably maybe 4 minutes of music or something, you know. And then there's like the random, like totally jacked up version that he did, you know, like, which there's like 10 of these, you know. So like the other 9 people that got this like have something that's pretty rare. Again, I think it's like utilizing like your resources and thinking creatively to figure out what those resources are, because a lot of people wouldn't think like, I'm gonna go to this print shop and cut up thousands of covers and glue them, you know. And also too, like I'd offer people like, all right, everybody, I'll like buy a bunch of pizza, come on over and like help me please, you know. But you know, it worked out, and it made an aesthetic, and people, I think, reacted to it in a really cool way.